The smell hit him first, char and blood, the ghostly perfume of the dead. Cale stood at the edge of the ruined village, boots sinking into soft mud, hand loosely resting on the hilt of a rust-flecked sword he hadn't drawn in weeks. His breath fogged in the chill air, mingling with smoke that still curled from scorched rooftops. Mere Rowell, they had called it. A peaceful farming hamlet, nestled in the southern downs. Now, it was a smudge on the landscape. Ash and splintered wood. Bones picked clean by crows. And still he came. Not for glory. Not for justice. Cale no longer cared for those sweet lies. He came for what the dead could not use. Food, perhaps. A cask of mead left unbroken. He was always thirsty. He staggered through the main road, uneven gait hiding the swordmaster he'd once been. Empty houses gaped at him, windows blown out like punched-in eyes. Someone had died trying to barricade a door, wood shattered inward, streaks of blood trailing across the floor. He didn't look closely. He'd seen enough slaughter to know the pattern. It wasn't bandits. This was cleaner, somehow. Surgical in its violence. Braga, he muttered. The Giantess. The Witch of the Wild Crown. She'd been a whisper years ago, an old myth for frightening children. Now, her name choked villages off the map. Cale reached the village square and paused. There, in the wreckage, lay something different. Not corpses. Not rubble. A shadow. Massive. Unmoving. She sat with her back to him, her form partially shrouded in steam from a cracked well beside her. Her size was staggering, easily 3 times his height, perhaps more. Skin the color of twilight, hair like a midnight river tumbling down her back. She was naked from the waist up, her enormous arms resting loosely on her knees. Her bare back rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. A living mountain, half lost in thought. He froze. She hadn't seen him. Or hadn't cared. She looked tired. Every instinct screamed to run. But Cale didn't move. Not out of courage. He was just too tired to be afraid. The wind shifted. Her head turned slightly, just enough for one pale eye to catch him. So, she said. Her voice was a low hum, like a distant avalanche. Another one come to die. Cale shrugged. Not if I can help it. Most try to kill me, she said, amused. You're not even holding your sword properly. I only draw steel when I think I might win. A pause. Then a soft, disbelieving laugh. You're drunk, she said. Aye, Cale admitted. And you look like hell. The giantess blinked. Slowly, she turned to face him fully. Her face was sharp-boned and unervingly beautiful, like a statue left too long in the storm. One eye was clouded, scarred. The other burned like a forge. She studied him, as one might examine a curious insect. You insult me? Not intentionally. Just speaking truth. Another silence. Her gaze lingered on him, taking in the tattered cloak, the dented armor beneath, the flasks at his belt. His sword hadn't been cleaned in months. His beard was uneven. A man clinging to the last threads of purpose. Why speak to me? She asked. Men usually scream. I don't have the voice for it, he said. Besides, I've screamed enough in my time. A flicker crossed her face, too brief to name. You think I won't crush you? Could have done that already. You're talking instead. Braga rose. The ground trembled. Cale fought the urge to step back. Standing, she towered above him like a god carved from storm and stone. Her bare feet cracked the cobbles. Her body was ringed with old battle scars, some from blades, some from fire, some from things he couldn't name. She stepped toward him. One step. Until her shadow swallowed him whole. He didn't move. She crouched, bringing her face close enough that her breath warmed his cheek. I've razed 12 villages in the past moon, she said. I've split men in 2 with my hands. Kings call me calamity. Priests call me blasphemy. And here you stand, drunk, telling me I look like hell. Cale stared up at her. Then why do you sound so sad? The silence that followed was deeper than any he'd known. The steam from the well hissed. A crow cried from a nearby roof. Somewhere far off, the wind danced through broken wheat. Braga's lips parted. then closed. She looked away. "What do you want, little man?" Kale exhaled. "Food. Drink. Maybe a place to sit." She blinked, stunned by the simplicity. Then, slowly, impossibly, she laughed. Not the cruel bark of a tyrant, but something cracked. Hollow. Real. She sat again, this time with a sigh that carried 1,000 years. "Then sit," she said, nodding beside her. "There's mead in the blacksmith's cellar. I didn't drink it. Thought it might taste like cowardice." Kale moved to sit near her, not close, but not cowering either. His limbs ached, but he smiled faintly as he settled into the dirt. "I've tasted cowardice," he muttered. "Tastes more like sour wine." Another chuckle. He reached into his coat and pulled out a dented flask. He took a swig, then offered it up. Braga stared at the tiny thing in his hand. With delicate fingers, she pinched it between thumb and forefinger, sniffed, then drank. "Rotgut," she muttered. "Best I could do." For a time, they sat in silence. A giantess and a drunk, surrounded by the ashes of the fallen. When night began to fall, she turned her head toward him. "Stay," she said. He looked up, surprised. "One moon cycle. Speak your truths. If they make sense by the end of it, maybe I'll let you leave. And if they don't—" She smiled. "Then I'll wear your bones for earrings." Kale considered this, then shrugged. "Fair enough." The mountain air had teeth. Cold and sharp, it bit at Kale's skin as he followed Braga along a crumbling trail carved into the cliffs. Trees leaned away from the path, and even birds held their breath when she passed. Her long strides made him scramble to keep up, but she never looked back. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the world like thunder before a storm. He had no idea why she'd let him live. Maybe she was curious. Maybe lonely. Or maybe she was simply delaying the inevitable. Still, he followed. Braga's lair wasn't a lair at all, at least not the kind he'd expected. No pile of bones, no cave dripping with blood. Instead, it was an old stone temple, half swallowed by ivy and centuries. The goddess it had once served was long forgotten, her name carved in a language even Braga no longer spoke. She ducked beneath the archway with practiced ease, and Kale entered after her, boots echoing on ancient stone. Inside was surprisingly warm. A fire crackled in a pit made of shattered altar pieces. Around the chamber were relics, a rusted crown, a scorched tapestry, a mirror that no longer reflected. Bits of the world, claimed in her fury. Braga lowered herself onto a carved slab that may have once been a throne. The mountain groaned beneath her weight. "You don't ask many questions," she said after a while. "I've learned that people usually tell you the truth when they think you aren't listening." A slow, amused breath. "You're not like the others. That's what people say when they're deciding whether to trust or kill me." She offered him the mead he'd found in Mirowell's ruins. He took it with a nod and drank deeply. Kale set down his sword. She noticed. "Giving up?" He shook his head. "Just putting down the weight for a while." They sat in silence for a time. Outside, the wind howled through the stone. Inside, the fire popped and hissed like an old friend grumbling in its sleep. "Why do you do it?" he asked finally. "The burning. The killing." Braga leaned back, one arm draped lazily across the back of her makeshift throne. "Because I tried to save them once," she said. "And they spat in my face." Kale said nothing. She continued. "There was a time I loved this land. Loved its people. I helped them crush invaders, stop famines, build roads. A godless giantess, earning their trust with sweat and steel. And then—" She paused. Her eyes flicked toward a tarnished circlet on a nearby pedestal. "There was a man. A king's bastard. Said he'd marry me. Said we'd rule together. He spoke of peace, unity. Said I was beautiful." Kale winced. He knew where this was going. Braga's lips curled into a bitter smile. "It was a trick. They poisoned me at the wedding feast. Not enough to kill me, just enough to keep me still while they dragged chains over my limbs and carved the truth into my skin. Abomination. Witch. Whore." She drew her finger across her chest, mimicking the blade. I broke the palace in half when I woke. Kale looked into the fire. You ever wonder what might have happened if you'd walked away instead? I did, she said quietly. Every day. For 100 years. Silence again. The fire flickered between them like a heartbeat. And you? She asked. What did you burn? Kale hesitated, then took another long drink. Whole villages, he said. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes because I was too drunk to swing straight. I was a champion once. A sword for a baron too ambitious for his boots. I led his men into lands that weren't his. Took what wasn't ours. And I enjoyed it. She watched him, unreadable. Did they call you a monster too? He smiled without humor. Only after they lost. Braga reached out. Her finger brushed a small iron emblem hanging around his neck, a relic of the war he'd tried to forget. You carry their mark still, she said. I carry everything, Kale replied. Even when I don't want to. That night, they spoke little more. She fell into a deep, dreamless slumber beside the fire, coiled like a serpent at rest. Kale watched her chest rise and fall, wondering how something so vast could look so small when asleep. The next morning, she tested him. Braga led him to a cliffside clearing strewn with broken statues of forgotten gods. Show me, she said, tossing him a blade, longer than a great sword, but small in her grip. What's left of the killer in you? He caught it and turned it in his hands. Not his sword. Lighter. Sharper. He moved through a form, an old dance of death. He hadn't practiced in years, but the motion still lived in his bones. Slash. Twist. Lunge. Parry. His feet found their rhythm in the dust, even as old wounds protested. She circled him, watching. Judging. Still fast, she said. But you flinch before each blow. Because I'm remembering the faces, he said. Braga smiled, not unkindly. Good. The ones who forget become kings. That night, they shared stories instead of swords. He told her of his childhood in the slums of Riverhall. She told him of waking alone in a cave as a child, already bigger than the trees, with no one to teach her what she was. By the end of the week, Kale no longer jumped when she moved near. And Braga no longer threatened to eat him for sport. The shift came slowly, like thaw after winter. And that was when the horns blew in the valley. Kale stood at the temple's edge, staring down at the tiny glints of metal far below, shields, lances, heraldry catching the sun. A hunting party. Maybe 30 men. They've come for me, Braga said behind him. Kale shook his head. No. They've come for us. Braga's eyes glinted. Will you run, little man? Kale looked out over the valley, jaw set. No, he said. But I won't kill unless I have to. She studied him, then gave a slow, solemn nod. Then the world will punish us both. They arrived at dawn. Banners fluttered like gory ribbons on the breeze, cresting the last hill in polished rows, 30 knights on horseback, glinting like the sun had taken up arms. At their center rode a man draped in crimson and gold, helm crowned with iron antlers, Ser Garin of the Golden Reach, Kale's former comrade. And the last man he'd ever called brother. Kale watched them from the cliff's edge, a dark silhouette against the sky. Behind him, Braga stood unmoving, her breath misting like smoke over his shoulder. They sent him, Kale murmured. You know this one. I trained him. His voice was flat. Taught him how to kill clean. Guess I did too good a job. Braga chuckled low in her throat. He's come to take your redemption, then. Tidy up your story. No, Kale's eyes narrowed. He's come to rewrite it. By midday, the knights had encircled the mountain base. Drums thudded. Horns groaned like dying whales. But no siege began. No war cries. They were waiting for Kale. He descended the trail alone, sword sheathed, hands open. The knights parted for him like a tide. Their expressions twisted in confusion, then disgust. A few made signs against evil. Garin sat astride a black stallion, regal and scornful, like a lion who'd scented weakness. Kale. He spat the name like it soured his tongue. So the rumors are true. You're alive, and crawling at the feet of a beast. Kale stopped a few paces short. "I'm not crawling." "No," Garen said. "You're kneeling. Which is worse." The men around him laughed, but it was a brittle sound. Kale raised a brow. "You've come to kill her?" "I've come to save you," Garen said. "You're a legend, Kale. A war hero. We can fix this. Say she bewitched you. Say you lured her into a trap. The lords are hungry for a tale." "You want a story," Kale said, "not the truth." Garen leaned forward. "What I want is the people to feel safe again. That means blood. Her blood. And if you don't help, yours too." Kale didn't answer right away. His eyes swept over the knights, young men, too proud, too eager. Mirrors of the man he used to be. He stepped forward. "I'm not your weapon anymore." Garen's expression darkened. "Then you're a traitor." "No," Kale said, drawing his sword, "not in threat, but in sorrow. Just a man who finally knows what mercy looks like." Garen nodded to his men. "Take him." The first blow came from the side, quick and clean, like Kale had taught them. He parried it, barely, and danced back. Another rushed in. Kale dodged, spinning low, sweeping the man's legs. But there were too many. A gauntlet slammed into his jaw. A boot into his gut. He fell to one knee. Someone kicked his sword away. He hit the ground, coughing blood, blinking through the blur. Garen stood over him, sword drawn. "Mercy is weakness, brother." "No," Kale said through broken teeth. "It's what comes after strength." And then the mountain moved. A roar shattered the air, and Braga came thundering down the slope like a god made flesh. Her eyes were fire. Her fists, meteors. She didn't roar commands. She was the command. The first night she struck shattered like glass, bones breaking in a dozen directions. Horses reared and fled. Men screamed. Arrows bounced off her skin like pebbles. Braga was fury unbound, but it wasn't mindless. Every blow was surgical. Precise. She didn't kill more than she had to. But there was no mercy when she reached Garen. She backhanded him across the clearing, helm flying, blood arcing. Kale barely saw him hit the ground. The rest fled. Broken. Terrified. And just like that, it was over. Braga stood over the wreckage, chest heaving. Blood dripped from her knuckles. Kale rose slowly, gripping his ribs. "You came," he rasped. "You're mine to destroy," she growled. "Not theirs." Kale chuckled, then coughed. "Charming." She looked down at him, then away, toward Garen, who groaned nearby, one leg twisted, face half crushed. "He's alive," she said. Kale nodded. "Barely. I could end him." "I know." Braga crouched beside the knight, enormous hands resting on her knees. "You hate him." "I hate what he became," Kale said. "But killing him won't change that." Braga studied him. "Then why not let me?" Kale didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Because that's what they expect." Braga stood. For a long time, she just stared at the sky, the mountains, the blood on her hands. Then she turned to Kale. "You've changed." He smiled faintly. "So have you." She opened her mouth, but swayed. Then collapsed. Kale was beside her in seconds, but she was too big, too heavy to lift. Her breathing was shallow, wet. A jagged piece of a broken lance jutted from her side, between ribs, where even her skin hadn't been enough. "Braga," he whispered. She looked at him, barely focused. "Fool," she said, blood in her mouth. "You should have run. You'd have hunted me down." She almost laughed. He gripped her hand, it dwarfed his, but she closed her fingers around it weakly. "You showed me something," she whispered. "A shape I thought I'd lost." Kale leaned in. "I don't want it to end like this." "Nothing ends," she murmured. "Only becomes." She pressed her palm to his chest. And something shifted. Heat. Pressure. A pulse like thunder. Her power surged into him, not violently, but like a river washing stone. He gasped. Saw visions not his own, Braga's memories. Her first sunrise. The first betrayal. The centuries of wandering, of war, of solitude. All of it poured into him. Not to destroy. To transform. Then she was gone. And Cale wasn't. He didn't cry. There was no room for tears. The world felt louder, brighter. His body burned, but not with pain. He stood slowly, taller, stronger. Something ancient had awakened beneath his skin. Not a curse. Not even a gift. A choice. He walked to Garin and stood over him. The knight blinked up at him, eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Do it," Garin croaked. "No." Cale turned and walked back toward the mountain. "What are you, then?" Garin called after him. Cale paused, looked at the horizon. Something new. The mountain was quiet now. No horns. No steel. Just wind threading through the broken statues and smoke rising from the dying fire in the temple's heart. Cale stood where Braga had once sat, on the old goddess's throne, now cracked from the weight of her passing. He stared into the embers, Braga's presence still clinging to the stone like heat long after flame. He could feel her. Not as a ghost. Not as memory. But in the curve of his breath. The steady thrum behind his ribs. The grounded strength in his limbs. He had not simply inherited her power. He had inherited her. Her patience. Her fury. Her grief. Her hope. The people came a week later. Not an army. Not knights. Just villagers. Farmers. Wanderers. The forgotten. They came up the mountain not with swords, but with stories. They spoke of the wind changing direction. Of the river near Mir Raoul running clear for the first time in years. Of animals returning to long-dead forests. They came seeking Braga, some to beg for peace, others to offer tribute. Instead, they found a man. A scarred, quiet man in a tattered cloak, who welcomed them with warm bread and clean water, and asked them only one question. "What will you build, if no one forces you to burn?" It began with small things. Cale helped repair the temple roof. He carried stones from the river to build shelters. He taught swordplay to those who wished to protect, and songs to those who wished to remember. Some asked him to lead. He refused. But they followed anyway. Not because he claimed power, but because he no longer needed it. He listened. And that, more than anything, changed them. The legend of the drunken swordsman who tamed the giantess became something else entirely. Less story, more seed. A tale that took root in villages and cities, whispered in taverns, painted on walls. And slowly, the kingdom began to shift. One night, as winter crept down the mountain, Cale stood once more on the cliff where he'd first seen Garin's banners. Snow fell in gentle flurries, blanketing the world in hush. A figure approached, cloaked in dark blue. Cale turned. Garin. No armor. No sword. Just tired eyes and a healing limp. "I shouldn't have come," Garin said. "Then why did you?" The knight hesitated. To see if the stories were true. Cale didn't speak. He let the silence stretch, heavy with old blood. "I was wrong," Garin said finally. "About her. About you." Cale nodded. "She used to say mercy is what comes after strength. I thought mercy was surrender." "It is," Cale said. "But not to others. To yourself." Garin lowered his gaze. "What do I do now?" Cale placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not as an absolution, but as a beginning. You start again, like the rest of us." In spring, children were born in the temple's shadow. Mothers planted gardens in its courtyard. Artists carved Braga's likeness into new stone pillars, not as a beast, but as a guardian. Fierce, proud, smiling. One day, a girl no taller than Cale's knee stood before him with a question. "Is the giantess really dead?" Cale knelt. "No," he said. "She became something else." "What did she become?" He smiled. "A choice." The girl blinked. "What kind of choice?" Cale tapped her chest gently. "The one you'll make. When it matters." That night, he dreamed. He stood on an endless plain beneath a sky full of stars that breathed like lungs. The wind carried Braga's voice, not as words, but as warmth. He didn't speak, but she heard him. And she answered, not with commands, but with trust. Not with power, but with peace. Years passed. The kingdom changed. Some still resisted. Some still burned. But fewer each year. And the people who once feared the mountain began to climb it not to conquer, but to learn. To remember what strength looked like when it bent to lift others instead of to crush them. Cale grew older, though slower than he should have. Braga's gift lingered in him, stretching time like thread. His hair silvered. His scars faded. But his eyes, her eyes now, remained sharp. One day, he woke in the temple to find a traveler sitting by the fire. A girl. 17, maybe 18. Broad-shouldered, hair wild, with eyes like stone freshly broken by a storm. "You're her, aren't you?" she asked. Cale sat slowly. "Who?" "The Giantess," she said. "Or what's left of her." He studied her. "And you?" She shrugged. "Angry. Strong. Alone." Cale tilted his head. "Not anymore." He handed her a sword. And she stayed. In the end, Cale didn't die. Not in fire. Not in war. He faded, like mist at dawn. Some say he walked into the mountains and became wind. Others say he sleeps beneath the temple, dreaming of peace still to come. But the truth, the real truth, is that he became what Braga once offered him. Not a monster. Not a hero. But a bridge. Between past and future. Between fury and forgiveness. Between what we fear and what we could become.